Hello, I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Here's today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks, and the risk is for the next several days going to stay in the northern plains for the most part. Here it is for today, Wednesday, with that level 2 out of 5 up there in the Dakotas. We'll zoom in on that in a second. There's a pretty substantial area around that of marginal risk of severe weather that goes all the way down into the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles and even includes parts of far west Texas. But here is the primary threat area today, a level 2 out of 5. And I'll go ahead and show you the tornado risk and the hail risk, but the hail and the wind risk pretty much coincide with the slight risk area here. Now, on the tornado side, there is actually a little bit of an enhancement here, up to 5% risk. And the percentages mean chance of any strength tornado within 25 miles of any point. So that pretty much covers northeastern South Dakota, with a larger area of 2% surrounding that, and that does go all the way down into Nebraska. And the SPC, Storm Prediction Center, did put an intensity estimate on that, so they're looking at these percentages for tornado strength. And again, that heavily weighs almost 80% in the EF0 and EF1 category. But an EF2 would not be out of the question, and pretty remote, it would be anything stronger than that. I wanted to show you where that, so again, the percentage chance of any tornado is the coloring, and the intensity is what to expect. So basically, equal intensity tornadoes expected in all this area, just a slightly higher chance of seeing that in the brown area. I did want to show you StormNet, because it does kind of progress this little tiny area of tornado risk that starts out here in south central South Dakota here at 7 o'clock. And then if we advance that one more frame, this is 9 o'clock. It just kind of moves on down the interstate here into more southeastern South Dakota. I just thought that was an interesting little observation there. And a NATOcast does show that same general area, except the brown is up at 5%. It's shifted a little bit more to the west, but pretty much the same general area for tornado risk, eastern half of South Dakota for today, later on today. The severe hail risk is outlined here with a 15% chance in yellow, and in terms of intensity on that one, well, I didn't transfer over the graphic, but this is the first level, I believe, of 3 for hail, and this pretty much keeps all the hail under 2 inches with the highest probabilities of hail. But also, NATOcast does a hail product and a wind product too. Wind's not too impressive today, but they do put a hatched area here for hail, so there's a 10% chance in this hatched area of 2-inch hail or greater. Not a very big chance, but the maximum, the 30%, is more than the SPC is saying, but in about the same area. Wind, not too excited about wind gusts with this, 15%, pretty standard. And again, that coincides with the slight risk almost exactly. So we'll take a look at Thursday. A front obviously sags in here with stable air behind it, and then the severe risk kind of gets carved out and also backs up to the west a little bit. So from extreme southeast Montana through South Dakota, parts of Nebraska and Minnesota as well. There is still a tornado risk with this. It backs up into the Badlands. Rapid City is right here. So maybe a sliver of northern Nebraska and parts of Wyoming as well. And interestingly, the NATOcast, if I wait late enough to the day, I can get the 12Z tomorrow forecast. So it shows that. This is a 3% chance of a tornado within 25 miles, but also curiously shows this area right here from northeast Kansas to just south of Omaha. So that bears some watching, I think. Don't think I'd be available to storm chase on that one tomorrow. It would be close enough. Now, on that front, if I had unlimited time and the conditional stuff was a little bit higher, I'd probably go up here and hang out a few days. But it's just on the edge for me of not really being great. I've seen better June patterns up north, so that's why I'm holding back. And also the distance. But this would be something I would consider if it were to rearrange itself maybe a little bit more. The CSU, Colorado State University 3-panel, which is tornado here, is South Dakota, hail and wind, 15%, with hail being more widespread, and that's been a common theme. Then we go ahead to Friday, and this moves back to the south and east again. So from Rochester, Minnesota, down to Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha is included in that, just barely missing Des Moines. That's the highest probability, 2 out of 5 for Friday. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, CSU puts tornado risks north and northeast of where the SPC does. That happens a lot. And a part of this is based on, it takes the information that is forecast for this area and does a search machine learning program. So it knows that, hey, when things have looked similar to this in the past, tornadoes have broken out in this area of green. Not again a very high probability; it's a 2% risk, but nevertheless, the hail seems to be maximized there in parts of Nebraska and Kansas. And then finally, on Saturday, barely up here, so Glasgow and over to Glendive, Montana, and into parts of the Badland in North Dakota, a 15% chance of severe weather. And you can see this just gets cut off as it goes north into Canada. But and I didn't look up the Canadian. There is a Canadian Outlook product. I just don't know where it is. But I'm sure they'd be talking about this quite a bit up to Regina and that area there. On CSU's outlook for Saturday, there's what the forecast was for SPC, and this is what CSU is saying. So there's a high correlation between the two. Even on Sunday, it doesn't move much. Still that same area from Rapid City northward, so the western parts of the Dakotas back into parts of Montana. Finally, we'll take a look at the outlooks from NIU. These are accumulated probabilities of supercells. So an entire week, this is the 3rd through the 9th. They just add up the probabilities and see, you can see what you get here. I find it interesting that their probabilities for June 3rd through the 9th has a maximum area here in Oklahoma and parts of Texas, not mentioned in the other forecasts. In other words, usually this first graph kind of sums up what the SPC is saying. So that's what this bullseye does. This bullseye, I think, is suggesting, I was watching the long-term 500 millibar flow, and there seems to be a weak, let me draw that better, a weak cutoff low that's kind of like moving through this area that might be enough to spark that maximum. I have a feeling that's what that is. And it may even be part of what this is. So the week after that, June 10th through the 16th, there's still some leftover supercell probabilities here. Again, the interpretation of that is that we have unstable air kind of looping around this feature, which is very slow moving and pretty weak too. But at this distance, if it looks weak, but it's there, it's worth keeping an eye on. And then June 17th through the 23rd, again, Kansas straight up into Montana, a very summertime, especially June time pattern for severe weather.